ever since 2016, there has been a very important conversation going around on the internet, and that was the idea of preserving anonymity. Because when people are anonymous, they can actually speak their mind. They can actually express opinions without fear of backlash, without being afraid of losing their jobs. And this is when left-leaning ideology comes in, an ideology that cannot define what a woman is, but manages to gain dominance in a lot of spaces simply by banning opposition, simply by making people afraid to speak against them. Because if you do speak against them, you may get actually fired from your job, or recently, as we're seeing in Britain, you can even get arrested for a Facebook post. So you can see that the left had a fundamental interest in removing internet anonymity. And many politicians and left-leaning activists have tried. For the last 10 years, by God, they tried. And they are quite successful to a certain degree. If you look at how the internet is structured now compared to how it used to be, many of the social media presences are linked to each other. If you actually want to see who tweeted something, there are many apps and ways to figure it out. So the internet is a lot less anonymous today than it used to be back in the day. And also, people are more fine with the lack of anonymity. I remember back in 2012 or so, Blizzard tried to link the Battle.net accounts to Facebook. And many users were absolutely outraged over this because, again, they wanted to be cheeky little shits while playing video games because it was entertainment. They wanted to have banter without being afraid of losing their jobs. So people who were part of Blizzard, they rose up and they started canceling their accounts. They pressured the company, and eventually Blizzard backed down. Nowadays, if you want to play even single-player games, you still have to link your email, and you still have to link your social media. You gotta create an account. So again, like, people are completely fine now with the lack of anonymity. But that doesn't seem to be enough for the politicians. That doesn't seem to be enough for the activists. They want even less anonymity on the internet. If possible, they actually want a digital ID. So they want to make absolutely sure that any person who uses a computer is going to use their real name, their real address. They're going to be easily identifiable, similar to the system that you already have in place in China. Now, even though people are fine with the idea of renouncing their anonymity to a certain degree, they don't seem to be that fine with the digital ID. Even most left-leaning people, they seem to be against the concept. So politicians and activists had to look hard in order to find a way to normalize the digital ID. And it seems that they have found one. You see, the internet has pornography on it. And it seems that the right and the left agree that children shouldn't watch pornography. And in order to achieve this, then anything should be on the table, including using a digital ID. So, like, if you're not in favor of using a digital ID, then obviously you want to hurt kids, which is not what most people that want anonymity on the internet are saying. They are saying that, no, of course, like, kids should not go onto mature websites, but a different system than requiring these websites to use digital ID should be found. So why is it that people are so against this law? Well, first of all, if you look at how other legislations were passed before, you can see that in Britain there is the Communication Offence Act. And that act was initially done in order to prevent phone harassment, as I understand. It's basically like if someone, goes on the yellow pages and finds your phone number and then starts harassing you over the phone, that law was there to protect people from, grossly offensive or stuff that was done via communication with the technology at the time. But as technology moved on, that law is now applied more broadly, and if you post something on Facebook, you can now be arrested for even 3-4 years. So we can see how laws are made for an initial purpose, and then the same legislation, the exact same wording, is being expanded. So in this situation, let's assume that in order to visit a pornographic website or any website that contains adult material, you need to sign in with a passport or an ID, or anything to verify that you're an adult. Well, great, right? So now you're saying that if someone wants to go on Pornhub, they should be unable to do so just by clicking, yes, I'm over 18. Perfect. What happens with Twitter? I mean, Twitter is a social media website, and it does have mature content on it. So how do you go on Twitter now? How do you get to post? Oh, that's right. Now you need to link your ID. You need to link your passport. You need to link your stuff. And I don't know the actual scope of the legislation. I haven't seen it, but it's not far-fetched to believe that, well, if they're going to say that any website which hosts adult stuff, you need to link your personal information, but it can be applied to social media. So it can be applied to Twitter. It can be applied to Discord. It can be applied to other places where, you may not even want to go there in order to see adult content, but you just want to go there in order to have a conversation with everyone else. And it seems that this discussion is not even on the table. It seems that even bringing up this discussion, people are like, oh, so you want kids to have access to... No, that's not what we're talking about. I want people to have internet anonymity. If it was up to me, kids should not be able to use the internet at all. In fact, I made this publicly several times. The internet, believe it or not, is a dangerous place. I know because I was a kid that I used the internet. So I do know the dangers of the internet. I'm not advocating for kids to use adults' website, but what I am advocating for is that adults should be able to maintain their anonymity. And as the left likes to say, racist jokes normalize racism, sexist jokes normalize sexism, but for some reason they don't think that showing your actual ID to a website normalizes the behavior that you need to verify your identity to use the internet. And there's also many other problems that comes with this. First of all, you have to trust that the companies will not store your data, which probably they won't. I mean, if the law forbids them from doing so, they will not do it, I assume. But what happens if the company gets hacked, right? Even if you're watching the most vanilla stuff, if your name gets associated with the things that you're watching, and you happen to be a judge, or you happen to be a prosecutor, or you happen to be a policymaker, your life is ruined. Now you can say, well, that's a good thing, but it depends how it's being done, right? So if some nefarious person gets access of the information, like let's say the website is hacked, and many websites have been hacked in the past, including PlayStation, Microsoft, so on and so forth. So even websites that have strong security have been hacked. All it requires is now a person to just call the politician or the judge and say, okay, we have your information. You can either do what we ask you, or we can leak it to the press. So that is a harrowing level of control that you're giving to nefarious individuals. Now, the idea that the internet is worse now than it used to be, right? Or that our generation has it worse because we have more pornography. This is also something that's completely disconnected from the past. I specifically dislike conservatives who do not understand the past. For instance, my grandfather had access to actual brothels. Like genuine houses of tolerance existed in my country, and they were legal during the interbellum period. So between World War I and World War II, there were actual houses of tolerance, that's what they were called, where you could go and you could pay and you would receive actual physical services. Not like OnlyFans shit, but genuinely, actual women. And this was true for most of the medieval history. But even after that, when I grew up, for instance, you had porn magazines, you had VHS tapes, there were cable channels that had adult content. There were phone lines where you could actually phone, and for a staggering amount of money per minute, you could actually speak with ladies that would cyber. The idea that our generation has access to more is completely false. There was access back then, and once people hit puberty, if they really wanted to get access to this type of material, they could. And here you have Politico writing an article explaining the exact same thing, that even if the internet was to be regulated, and let's say you go to these, mainstream adult websites like Pornhub and many others, and in order to access them, you gotta show your passport, you gotta show your ID. What do you do with the unregulated part of the internet? Because all you're doing is you're pushing people to go back to the old days. So they're going to just go back to piracy, to other websites that are not regulated. For better or for worse, at least the mainstream websites, they are under regulations, and while they had problems in the past, at least most of the content there is legal. Like, if it's not, the authorities are watching, and they can just crack down on it. But like most of the websites, especially the ones that use payment processors, have legal content there. What you're doing is you're pushing people back to the underground. You're pushing them to the places that are illegal. And I think that the lawmakers are aware of this, which is why I do not think that these types of regulations are actually there to fight pornography. I think that they are there to normalize the concept that if you want to go on the internet, you gotta renounce your anonymity. And the reason that I think about this is because I'm looking at China, and it's a perfect system for an authoritarian government to use. The idea that, okay, when you go online, you gotta show your face, you gotta facial scan, you gotta link your actual name and actual personality to the internet so that you are dissuaded from typing any anti-government or anti-establishment opinions. I think this is the actual purpose. And I did look at some of the activist groups that are pushing for this, because in the United States, you also have like right-wing groups that are pushing for it, as well as left-leaning groups. So one of the first things that I noticed was the Bizarre Alliance, right? I think like AOC actually signed an agreement with one of these right-wing groups, which is like very bizarre. Like, why would AOC, a far-left politician, like agree with right-wingers on anything? And then when you look at these right-wing activist groups, they don't use right-wing language. Right-wing language would be like, it is obscene, it is degenerate, it is sinful, it is against God. No, they use left-wing language. They use rape culture, sexualization, objectification, right? So you have like all these activists on both sides of the ideological spectrum just agreeing with each other and using the same language, which is very bizarre and astroturf to me. Again, one of the things that is happening now in the United States, I understand that a couple of states have passed legislation requiring Pornhub to verify the identity of the people using it, and Pornhub shut down. So now you have like a lot of people on the internet saying, see, like they actually want children to be there. But when you actually look at the press communication, and they're justifying why they shut down in those states, is because they do not want to be responsible holding the private information of so many citizens. Because again, imagine if they get hacked, right? Imagine if something happens and there's a leak, or one of their employees goes rogue and publishes like all of that aggregated information. It's not just that, you know, the damage to their reputation, but they will get sued. I mean, the company itself would probably be dissolved under the lawsuits. So I can definitely understand why the company doesn't want to do business in those states, because it is definitely not worthwhile. But what would be interesting, and no one wants to talk about this, would be to create a study in the states where Pornhub has decided to shut down, and see if the consumption of adult material has actually increased or decreased. Because I have a feeling it remained the same. I think that a person that just wants to go on an adult material website in order to satisfy their needs, if that website doesn't exist, they'll just go into another place. That's my opinion. And, you know, it would be interesting if a study is done to see the actual effects. And also take into account that most people who do go to these websites, they're quite ashamed of it, right? There is social stigma on it, and there should be. So they're not going to be open partaking in the conversation. But the fact that these websites are free, and yet there are a multi-billion-dollar industry, tells me that quite a significant chunk of the population is actually using these websites, including people who like to virtue signal and pretend that they're not using it. So, again, I would love to see a study in the places where these websites have been shut down, and see if the consumption of adult material has remained the same, if it has gone up or gone down. What do you guys think? And let me know what you have to say about this in the comment section, and until later, take care.